I'm Frank B. Shaner, and I'm here today to talk about a very serious problem that affects our elders, our kupuna, and the many family and friends who care about them. It's called elder abuse, and it comes in many different forms. It's difficult to identify and not easily resolved. When many of Hawaii's elders should be enjoying their golden years, some people are finding that they're still primary caregivers to their adult children and grandchildren. Hawaii's ice epidemic is a major factor. Abuse is nothing to be ashamed about, but when it happens, appropriate action must be taken. Abuse affects the entire family, our kupuna, the elder. Everyone is affected by abuse. Come inside. We have a lot more to talk about. In Hawaii, because many of us have close relationships with our family and extended ohana, sometimes these dynamic relationships can make problems, such as drug addiction, even more difficult to confront. Unfortunately, at the root of many family problems is ice, crystal methamphetamine, one of the most addictive drugs there is, and the fastest growing drug problem in the United States. This video is made to help you understand abuse, how to recognize it, what you can do about it, and what are the choices you can make. Maybe the most important message we can share with you is to assure you that you are not alone. During the next half hour, we're going to hear from people who work in the field of elderly abuse, social workers, psychologists, attorneys, and other experts who specialize in meth addiction and the effects on families and community. You'll meet a son who has abused family members, someone who has committed felonies against his own mother, but is now a recovering addict in the process of repairing his life. You'll also meet elders like you, who may be feeling confused, scared, and not sure about what they can do to make things right.
I think that in part it's a cultural thing. We live in ohana communities where we have multiple generations living in the same household. We live in communities where everything is about family and where pride is very important. And families don't want the neighbors and the community at large to know if there is something going on in the family that is not okay. So they try to keep it in the family, although it does get out on the street, because once any family member gets involved with ice, the progression, the addiction becomes overpowering. The progression in terms of behaviors escalates to the point that their behaviors become out of control.
I'm a neurologist who's been interested in studying methamphetamine. During that high, a lot of chemicals are changing in the brain. Dopamine is a chemical that controls coordination and movement, and it's also very important for helping us to focus so that we can learn. And people who use methamphetamine for a long time have difficulty with learning, so when we do paper and pencil tests or computerized tests where we can measure their reaction times, they have difficulty performing those tests. When they're using the drug, they hardly ever sleep. They go for weeks without sleeping. You're not going to be able to concentrate or remember things or be able to function and think clearly.
This is probably one of the most impressively addicting drugs that I have ever encountered. It's an extremely compelling drug, and it's extremely difficult to get away from it. I can't emphasize enough that it is an illness.
Because your family member is going to get progressively worse, what he or she does to you will also get progressively worse. Shame cannot be an issue. You cannot let it influence the difficult choices you must make. How bad can it get? Well, just look at our headlines.
"20-year-old Michael White silently prayed off and on throughout his court hearing. He is charged with attempting to murder his mother and his aunt. Police say he burned down the family home in Kailua last week, that he stabbed his mother and his aunt and then set them both on fire. A police detective testified that Carrie White had called her husband that afternoon.
She asked Mr. White to take a short day because Micah was tweaking. Micah was being Micah, and he was tweaking.
One more phone call followed.
She was telling him that Micah was threatening her with a rolling pin, so he told her, just go in the other room.
Micah White cried through most of the hearing, and when not crying, he would silently pray. His mother suffered 3 stab wounds and critical burns over 80% of her body. His aunt has burns over 50% of her body. Fire investigators say gasoline had been poured through much of the house, and paramedics testified the women reeked of gasoline. Captain Glenn Solomon says Sharon White was wearing an oxygen mask when he spoke with her.
Who did this to you? Then she reached up and pulled a mask off her face and said, Micah did this to us.
Sources have told KITV4 News Micah White had been a user of crystal methamphetamine. The hearing judge today ruled there is enough evidence to try Micah White on a charge of attempted murder in the first degree. That is, attempting to murder more than one person in the same incident, a crime that carries a punishment of life in prison without parole.